I used to believe there would always be a seat for me, even if I arrived late. The navy velvet dress was already zipped, sleeves pressed hem falling just above the knees. Conservative but still a little soft around the edges. I had laid it out the night before, draped carefully across the back of a dining chair, like something borrowed, not owned. It had once belonged to my grandmother, altered only slightly to fit my shoulders. There was a loose thread near the cuff. I kept running my thumb across it without pulling. My phone lit up with a message from Clara. Opening remarks just started. Thought you'd be front row. I stared at it for a while, the kind of long stare that doesn't expect anything to change, but waits anyway. I checked my email again, refreshed my inbox. There was nothing. Not in primary, not in spam, no confirmation, no seat number, no welcome packet. I called my mother, straight to voicemail. I called Dylan. One ring, then silence. Clara texted again this time with a picture. Look who made it early. In the photo, my mother stood between Dylan and a man I didn't recognize, all three of them smiling beneath a gold and maroon banner. Dylan wore a deep grey suit, slightly too large in the shoulders. Mother's lipstick was the same colour she always wore for public events, coral dry, unyielding. At the bottom of the frame, there were printed place cards taped to folding chairs. Elaine Granger, Dylan Ellis, Dr. Robert Hale. Guest speaker. No card for me, no seat. I zoomed in, wondering if perhaps mine had been cropped out. I stared harder until my eyes watered. Another message came through, this one, from an unknown number. The tone, however, was unmistakable. You don't need to come. Everything's already been arranged. Don't make it complicated. I didn't respond. I didn't throw the phone either. I just stood there, still in my grandmother's dress, looking at my reflection like it might tell me what I had missed. The silence in my apartment was sharper than usual. Even the refrigerator had quieted the soft hum, no longer cushioning the air. I sat down at the edge of the bed and smoothed the fabric over my knees. My palms left faint marks on the velvet, then slowly faded. Years ago, I used to imagine my family proud of me, not for being perfect, just for staying. For trying. I had rehearsed that image so many times it felt almost historical. Mother beaming, Dylan nodding with quiet respect, and me finally seen. Instead, there were these new versions. Polished, coordinated, public. I opened my laptop and pulled up the school's live stream. The camera panned across the stage. Familiar professors in their robes, the floral arrangements a line of students waiting for their names. Then, as the dean welcomed the families, the feed cut to the audience. There they were. My family. Front row. Smiling. The man beside them was being introduced as a donor, one of the community pillars. Mother leaned over, said something to him. He nodded. She laughed, covering her mouth just enough. I turned the volume down. A memory flickered her voice years earlier, standing in a kitchen after I got into the psychology program. Therapists don't make real money. If you're going to waste your time, don't expect me to clap for it. She hadn't clapped. Not then. Not now. Another voice, Dylan's last winter over coffee. You always read too much into things. She's under a lot of pressure. You know how she is. That's the part I know too well. I shut the laptop. The heat from the keyboard had left faint lines across my thighs through the dress. I unzipped it slowly and placed it back on the hanger. There was a coffee stain on the collar I hadn't noticed before. Not fresh. Set in. The kind that doesn't come out even with soaking. I didn't cry. There was no rush of outrage, no spinning emotion to organize. Just a hollow, familiar flatness, like being in a room with no windows, just mirrors. I put the dress back in the garment bag and slid it under the bed. The phone buzzed again, this time from Dylan. I hope you understand. It's not about you. She just needed today to go smoothly. I didn't type anything back. I read the sentence again and again until the words sounded like someone else's code for erasure. It wasn't about me. That much had been true for a very long time. I turned the phone over, screen down, and let it rest. The weight of it disappeared once I stopped holding it. Across the room, the light hit the corner of a photo frame I'd forgotten I owned, an old picture of me and Grandma Rose in her garden. We were both kneeling beside a row of lavender hands and dirt cheeks smudged with pollen and sun. I remember thinking she smelled like soap and wild mint. She had once told me in that quiet way of hers, "If they don't make room for you, plant your own table." I didn't know what she meant then, but I think I do now. I used to believe that if I could become the least demanding person in the room, I might finally earn a place inside it. There were no instructions for belonging in my family, only subtle rules written in silence. Someone would set the pace, someone else would take the credit, and the rest of us learned to keep quiet and adjust. I adjusted early, was good at patterns. I could read a room faster than I could read most books, which meant I knew when to speak, and more often when not to. At 13, I learned how to iron linen napkins without burning the edges. I folded them into fans, triangles, swans, whatever made the table look less empty. My mother never commented on the napkins. She only frowned if I folded them unevenly. "You always had a quiet touch," she once said at a holiday gathering. Margot never needed attention. A relief, really. It sounded like praise, but something about it thudded in my chest, like a door closing. By high school, I had stopped showing her my sketchbooks. She had once flipped through them with a half smile, stopping on a charcoal drawing of an old maple tree I'd seen behind the school. "This is sweet," she said, "but don't let it distract you. When I applied to college, I listed accounting as my major. It was easier than explaining what I actually loved. Art is for people with trust funds," she had told me once. "Therapy's just another word for whining." So I kept quiet. I studied what she approved of. I kept my grades high and my voice low. Every holiday I came home early to prepare the house. I ironed tablecloths, polished the silver, checked on the turkey, while she scrolled through her phone in the living room. She never told me to do any of it. But she didn't stop me either. After dinner, while the others relaxed with wine and music, I washed the dishes alone. Dylan would pass by the kitchen and say something like, "You do this to yourself, you know." He said it without malice. Just a shrug. Like a fact. At 16, I got my first job bagging groceries. I used the paychecks to cover textbooks and bus fare. When Dylan turned 17, he got a car. Not a new one, but sleek enough to earn compliments. "He's got places to go," she explained. "You're more grounded. Walking's good for your thoughts." That winter, I started keeping an extra pair of socks in my bag. Some days I'd come home with my shoes soaked through, and she'd comment on the mud I tracked in. On her birthday one year, I spent 2 days baking her favorite dessert, lemon tart, with almond crust. I cleaned the kitchen before she came home, arranged fresh flowers in a vase, and left a small card by her plate. She blew out the candles and turned to Dylan. "You always know how to make the day special." He had arrived with a store-bought bouquet. I nodded. Cut the tart, served the slices. In college, I took accounting classes during the day and sat in on psychology lectures in the evenings. I kept 2 notebooks, one for what I was expected to know, one for what I cared about. During sophomore year, I officially changed majors. I didn't tell her. There was no announcement, no ceremony. I just signed the form in the registrar's office and walked out before I could doubt it. When I came home for break, she flipped through the course list. "I see you're sticking with numbers, smart girl." I didn't correct her. I stirred the soup. I passed the salt. When Dylan landed an internship at a firm downtown, we threw a dinner party. She toasted him proudly. "You've done what none of us could," she said. I had published a small paper that semester. She hadn't read it. I once told her I was applying for a research grant in developmental trauma. She didn't look up from her planner. "That's a heavy burden to carry at your age. Are you sure you want to be in people's problems all day?" I nodded. Changed the subject. When I graduated, I wore a second-hand gown and a borrowed tassel. The sleeves were too short. No one came. I took the bus home afterward, holding my diploma in a recycled envelope. That night, I got a voicemail. "If you're rethinking your plans, we always have space for you here. Just don't do anything reckless." That was the word she used, reckless, as if building a life outside her orbit meant falling off a ledge. I applied for the grant again. I didn't tell her this time. There was a Christmas I bought her, a first edition of a novel she once said meant everything to her in high school. I found it in a thrift shop and wrapped it in linen with a ribbon. She unwrapped it, ran her fingers over the spine and set it aside. "This is a little dated now. You know I don't really keep old things. I saw it in the donation box 2 days later. I learned not to take it personally, or at least not out loud. During family dinners, I stopped bringing up work. It made people uncomfortable when I talked about trauma or boundaries. Instead, I poured wine, asked about Dylan's job, complimented the centerpiece. At church, when I sat beside her, she'd introduce me as my daughter, the one with the quiet career. Once Dylan joked, "You're like the piano in the corner. Nice to look at, but nobody plays it." He laughed. I did too. But I still remember the words clear as winter air. I stayed because it seemed like the only way to keep peace. I kept doing what made everyone else more comfortable, thinking maybe eventually I would be part of that comfort. But the quieter I was, the longer I stayed. And the longer I stayed, the more I stopped noticing the outline of myself fading in the corners. It wasn't martyrdom. It wasn't noble. It was survival disguised as politeness. And somewhere in that silence, I forgot what it felt like to take up space without apology. I used to think small things didn't last, but they stay longer than they should, especially when no one else remembers them. There was a Christmas years ago when the gifts sat beneath the tree longer than the people who opened them. I remember the box I picked up had stiff corners and gold paper with tiny white stars. The ribbon slid off easily. Inside was a pale blue scarf and a card. On the front, printed in cursive, "To my favorite child." I opened it slowly, hoping it was meant to be funny. Inside, in her careful, practiced handwriting, just one word, Dylan. She hadn't noticed me standing in the hallway the night before, watching her write it beside her glass of Pinot and a half-read lifestyle magazine. I remember the way she paused before sealing the envelope, tapped her pen twice on the table, and then smiled faintly as if she had gotten something just right. Later that evening, she raised a toast, "To the one who always makes the season feel full." He laughed and tipped his glass toward her. I passed the potatoes in silence. There was a necklace once, a simple silver chain with a compass pendant. She handed it to Dylan in the kitchen, said something about symbolic direction. When I asked, she said, "It's meant for both of you. Take turns." I never wore it. It stayed on him like skin. The photograph on the living room wall was supposed to be a family picture. Autumn leaves, park bench, matching scarves. She, Dylan, and our grandmother were framed neatly in the center. My side of the bench had been cropped out. "The frame only fits 3, she told me when I asked. You understand. I stopped asking about photos after that. When I was 20, I brought someone home. His name was Ben. Not someone to impress her, just someone who made me laugh. He brought flowers, wore a navy sweater, offered to help carry groceries. She looked him over once and said, "Is this a real introduction? Or just a trial run?" He smiled politely, tried to compliment the living room decor. She adjusted the vase on the mantel. Margot's always had interesting taste. He asked if she meant that kindly. She didn't answer. He left early. I didn't bring anyone home again. The summer before senior year, I was awarded a small research grant. It wasn't prestigious, but I had worked for it late nights, revisions, reviews. I printed the certificate and tucked it behind a thank you note, carried both home in a manila envelope. I placed it gently beside her coffee mug one morning. She opened it, mid-sip, scanned the words. "Psychological resilience in children," she read aloud. "Well, it's not exactly something that pays rent." She slid the envelope back across the table. "Still, you've always been good at small victories." I didn't bring up research again. There was a time when I helped her clean out the attic. We found old coats, holiday linens, a music box with a chipped ballerina inside. She dusted it off, turned the crank. A soft, broken tune played. "That used to be yours," she said, absently, "though you probably don't remember." I did. I had cried when it cracked. She told me, "Some things don't get fixed. They just stop playing." I remember her giving Dylan her old wristwatch when he got his first internship. She didn't say anything when she handed it over, just fastened it around his wrist and nodded. I found the box it came in a week later, tucked inside the hallway drawer. My name was written in faint pencil on the underside of the lid. It had been erased mostly. There was a dinner once meant to celebrate my graduation from a certificate program I completed while working part-time. I made the reservation. I paid the deposit. She arrived 10 minutes late. When the server asked if we were celebrating anything, she folded her napkin carefully. "Just catching up. Nothing worth announcing." After the meal, I asked if she'd enjoyed it. She picked at something between her teeth and said, "Let's just hope the next chapter makes more sense than the last." I stopped organizing dinners. One morning, years later, I found a bag of donations on her porch. She had called and told me to pick it up, said she was decluttering. Inside was a box labeled Margot's Things. There were 3 items: a faded sweater with a stretched collar, a book I had loaned her and never got back, and a frame with no photo inside. The label on the frame still read, "Family." I kept it, but never filled it. Sometimes I wonder what my name sounds like in her head. If it still has weight, if it echoes or disappears before she finishes thinking it. I used to imagine there would be a moment, just one, where she'd turn and notice me clearly without squinting. A memory, with my name in the center, not at the edge, but maybe some people only learn to see in certain directions. And maybe I was always standing where the light didn't reach. Some betrayals don't scream. They just sit there printed in black ink, waiting to be read in full. I had gone to the bank that morning thinking only of logistics. I needed to update my information for the scholarship office and verify the small inheritance my grandmother had once whispered about. $14,200, not enough to change a life, but enough to ease the weight of each month. She used to keep her statements tucked inside a manila folder, edges softened from years of use. "This is for you," she said once, while I helped her rearrange the linen closet. "In case you ever need to start fresh." The man at the counter typed for longer than expected. His eyes paused, then scanned the screen again. I watched his fingers hesitate above the keyboard. Actually, he began that account was closed out over a year ago. Entire balance transferred. He showed me the form. Transfer date May 2nd. Authorized by Elaine Granger. Note, reallocation to family account. The envelope with the stamped confirmation was handed to me without ceremony. The ink on the back had smudged slightly, leaving a faint shadow of numbers pressed into the paper. I folded it once, then again, until it fit into the palm of my hand. Outside, I sat at the bus stop for 3 full arrivals before stepping onto one. My fingers didn't release the envelope. Not when the driver nodded. Not when the brakes hissed at red lights. At the corner where the bus turned onto Hensley, I called her. "I'm at work. Can this wait?" I didn't answer right away. She filled the space herself. "If this is about the money, you should have asked sooner." That was for the family. I said I hadn't agreed to any transfer. You don't get to be selective, Margot. Either you're part of the family, or you're not. You made your choice. I said it had been left to me. In writing. She exhaled sharply. That money was never yours. Your grandmother trusted me to handle it responsibly. I've done that. I mentioned legal advice. Slowly. Cautiously. Do what you want. But there's nothing to fight for. It was never in your name. I said nothing more. The line went quiet, then disconnected. The bus kept moving. I pressed the envelope flat against my thigh, smoothing the creases, as if that could undo what was already gone. I walked into the old cafe near the library. It used to be my space. They had changed the lighting, less yellow now, colder. I sat at the same corner table near the window. There was a small ring on the wood where a cup had once rested. I didn't order anything. The waitress, a girl I didn't know, placed a glass of water beside me anyway. I nodded. She walked away. I stared at the water. A thin layer of condensation slid down the outside, forming a small pool that crept toward the folded envelope. It stayed there untouched. There had always been this thread inside me, thin, quiet, stubborn, that insisted things would work out if I stayed reasonable, if I didn't raise my voice, if I kept showing up. But this wasn't silence anymore. This was erasure. She had taken what was mine and renamed it, labeled it ours but never asked. I thought of my grandmother's hands, how she folded towels with military precision, how she sent me birthday cards with stickers she knew I found childish, always signed in cursive for my strong one. After the funeral, no one asked what I wanted to keep. Her books disappeared. Her quilt was donated. A month later, I found Dylan wearing one of her brooches as a tie pin at a family dinner. When I looked at him, he shrugged. "It's just a pin, Margot." "Don't be dramatic." I held my breath through the meal. That night, I took the long route home. Back at the cafe, the water was still untouched. The waitress returned once to clear a nearby table. She didn't glance at me. I didn't move. I unfolded the envelope again. The date stared back. May 2nd. Around the time I had sent her a message about my final project, she had replied with a thumbs up. No words. I hadn't noticed it then. That her replies were getting shorter, that I was becoming smaller in her eyes. Maybe not becoming. Maybe I had always been. I traced the ridges where the ink had bled. There was a fingerprint at the bottom corner. Not mine. She used the word reallocation, as if I were a budget line to be erased, as if what belonged to me could be folded into something unnamed just because she held the pen. I had once believed that silence could be noble, that stepping aside meant I was strong enough not to need recognition. But sitting there with a cup I hadn't touched, and a glass of water I hadn't asked for, I realized silence only works when someone is listening. And in that family I had been whispering into a vacuum, not because I didn't speak, but because they never intended to hear me. Some endings don't echo, they just go quiet. I didn't tell anyone. There was no confrontation, no speech, only a folder marked separation in the corner of my desk and a slow untying of knots no one else saw. At the DMV, I filled out the form to update my emergency contact. I left the line blank. The clerk looked up then down again and stamped it without a word. The envelope with the bank's logo arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it over the sink where I used to rinse fruit for Sunday lunches no one showed up for. I read the statement twice, just numbers, a closing balance, and my name standing alone at the top. I slid it under the drawer with the dull knives and unopened soy sauce packets. I never shredded it. The lawyer I hired was gentle, distant. She explained things in slow syllables as if I might flinch. I didn't. I signed the document, confirming my name was never on the family trust, only listed as discretionary at guardian's will. I asked if there was any point to appeal. Her head shook softly. I thanked her and left before the tea she'd offered had cooled. At the leasing office, I said I needed to terminate my agreement early. The receptionist blinked at the name on the form. "You're Elaine's daughter." I nodded. "She was just here last month. Said you might be moving back in with her." I signed anyway. The new place had a cracked tile near the fridge and a ceiling fan that clicked even when off. It didn't matter. I chose it. No one had co-signed, no one had negotiated the price, no one had inspected the bathroom and said, "Well, it's not ideal, but it'll do for now." It was mine. The first night I moved in, I opened the final box. It held a photo in a bent silver frame our last Christmas together. Elaine in pearls, Dylan holding the carving knife, me half out to frame, smiling at something cropped away. I wrapped it in newspaper then in an old scarf and slid it to the far back corner of the closet. At work, I updated my emergency form. Again, I left the next of kin line blank. The HR woman tilted her head. "Are you sure you want to leave this empty?" I said yes. I unsubscribed from every shared streaming account. The password to one of them had been my birthday. No one noticed when it stopped working. On Facebook, I untagged myself from family photos. Dylan had posted a throwback of his college graduation with the caption, "Wouldn't be here without Mom." I had taken that picture. I didn't comment. The phone rang once, maybe twice. Voicemails were short. "You're being unfair. She only wanted what's best for everyone. She's hurt too, you know." I listened, deleted, then changed my number. I didn't save the new one under any group chat. I stopped using read receipts. The silence began to fold around me, like a coat I had outgrown, but still wore out of habit. Eventually, it fit. I sorted my bookshelf alphabetically. A book Elaine once gave me, Habits of Highly Effective Women, ended up beneath the sink, holding the cabinet door closed. There had been a Sunday when she dropped off a pie. No explanation, no note, just a tin container on my old doormat. I left it outside. The ants reached it before I did. The hardest part was unsubscribing from the family calendar. I hovered over the remove button longer than necessary. My name blinked once, then vanished. A week later, I received a message from her. "You'll regret making everything so difficult." I stared at it for an hour, then blocked the number. The phone felt lighter in my palm after that. One morning, I found a necklace tucked in an envelope between old bills. The chain was thin, the charm a small compass. I remembered Dylan wearing it for months in high school, even though she once told me it was meant for both of us. I left it on a bench outside the library. Someone else might need direction. At the grocery store, I passed a woman who looked like her. Same haircut, same habit of checking grapes for softness. I didn't slow down. On my refrigerator now is a postcard I drew in watercolor, a chair facing a window, sunlight spilling in, no one sitting. Below it, in fine black ink, I am not missing. I am choosing. She would call that dramatic. Years ago, during an argument that wasn't loud, just final, she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "No one's keeping you here." I believed her. I cancelled the family insurance plan, started paying for my own dental, bought a car in my own name, changed the "in case of emergency contact" to none. I deleted all group photos from my cloud. The last one was from Dylan's birthday. He was mid-laugh. She was holding the cake. I was reaching for a plate. No one handed me. I still have a keychain from our old house. Not the key, just the tag with the faded address, the number 3 peeling off in flakes. I keep it in a drawer with old receipts. It rattles sometimes when I open it, like a sound that doesn't know it's been left behind. I don't tell new people much about my family. If they ask, I say, "It's just me." The more I say it, the more true it become. There's a quote framed above my desk now, something I wrote on the back of a napkin once and never threw away. It reads, "Not all roots are meant to be watered." It sits beside a small ceramic dish, chipped at the edge, where I keep coins and quiet things. I don't expect the phone to ring. I no longer keep it face up. I used to think silence needed filling. Now it moves differently in my space. The apartment had only one window facing west, and it didn't open all the way. The paint near the ceiling peeled like paper left in the sun too long. The fan groaned at night and spun unevenly, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. But no one knocked. No one told me to keep it quiet, or cleaner, or warmer. There was no welcome mat. I didn't buy one. I spent the first evening unpacking the bare minimum socks, a chipped mug, a notebook with more folded corners than blank pages. The air smelled faintly of dust and metal. I didn't light a candle. I sat on the floor with one leg folded under me and stared at the uncurtained window. It stared back. The mattress came the next day. I dragged it in myself, sliding it awkwardly over the floorboards. My back ached, but I didn't mind. No one offered to help. No one reminded me that I wasn't strong enough for heavy things. I left it in the corner of the room without a frame. Later, I lay on it in jeans and socks and listened to the hum of the refrigerator across the space. It was the only sound that didn't try to be anything else. I didn't cook for the first few days. Toast and instant oatmeal. I burned the first piece of bread and opened the window to wave the smoke outside. A neighbor across the way raised a hand. I raised mine back. No names were exchanged. On the third morning, I made coffee. Just one cup, no one to ask if they wanted any. The mug was plain white, heavier than it looked with a small chip near the handle. I bought it at a thrift store because it felt clean in its simplicity. I had once held a similar one in a store, but she had looked at it and said, "That's not exactly elegant." I put it back then. Now I held it with both hands and watched the steam rise into the dull morning light. I didn't add sugar. The fridge hummed softly. On its door, I taped a small yellow note that read, "Don't explain, just build." I didn't remember writing it, but the handwriting was mine. Something I must have scribbled once and folded away. I found it tucked into a paperback I hadn't opened in years. A list began to grow in my head, not things to buy, or clean, or prove, just small anchors. Wash the cup each night, stretch in the morning, let the mail pile up. I didn't need to be efficient or pleasant or ready. I only needed to be here. A voicemail came late one night. No greeting, just her voice clipped and dry. You've made your point. Don't drag this out. I deleted it without playing the end. The sound of her breath lingering too long after a sentence still unnerved me. The next day I turned off voicemail altogether. There was a small market 2 blocks away. I bought a bunch of green grapes, some bread, and a candle that smelled like cedar wood. Not because anyone liked the scent, not because it matched the season. Just because I had never bought one for myself. I lit it that night and left it on the windowsill. The flame flickered quietly, and for a second I thought I heard her voice again, half a memory, half invention. You still don't know how to live on your own. I watched the candle, but it didn't respond. I folded laundry in silence. No one commented on how I organized things or which shirts looked faded. I wore a stretched sweatshirt with paint on the sleeve. No one called it childish. One afternoon I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a clipping from a church bulletin, a photo of Dylan shaking hands with a local councilwoman. The caption read, "A family rooted in service." I tore it once, then twice, and dropped the pieces into the bin beneath the sink. I didn't cry. I swept the floor instead. Evenings came earlier now. The western light hit the far wall and turned it amber. I stood in it once just to see if it warmed my skin. It didn't much, but it felt like something waiting. I didn't have visitors. I didn't send updates. I posted nothing. I answered selectively. I stopped explaining. The lock clicked each night, and no one questioned why I needed 2 turns. No one asked where I'd been. I opened a new notebook and wrote 1 sentence on the first page. Let this not be survival, but the start of something still. Then I closed it and placed it face down beside the candle. Some people only remember you when the silence starts to cost them something. The message came late. Not a text, but a missed call from a number I hadn't saved. I didn't answer. A second call followed, then a voicemail I didn't listen to for 2 days. When I finally did, it played with a clipped urgency that didn't match the words. She's really overwhelmed. Mom, I mean. She wanted me to ask if you could maybe show up at the school board meeting next week. Just for optics. Just so it looks like everything's fine. No apology. No question about how I was doing. Just the usual rephrasing of a need into a favor. I left the kettle on the burner too long that morning. The steam curled upward without a whistle. I poured the water anyway and let the tea sit untouched. The ceramic mug grey no design rested quietly beside my hand. The heat had already gone out of it by the time I read the second message. Margot, you are still family. You know I need you right now. The word need didn't echo the way it used to. It sounded like someone fumbling for a misplaced item, not reaching for a person. I didn't reply. That week, I heard from Mrs. Beasley, an old neighbour who used to drop off cookies every December. She ran into me near the post office. Your mother's having such a hard time, she said, adjusting the strap on her purse. She says you've changed, that you've become difficult. I nodded and folded the envelope in my hand until the corners lined up perfectly. I didn't ask for more. Later that evening, I opened my laptop to check the news and ended up on her Facebook page. I hadn't looked in weeks. A photo greeted me, Dylan standing beside her at a charity gala, both dressed in blue. The caption underneath read, "Families aren't perfect, but mothers give everything until there's nothing left. The hardest part is when the children turn away when you need them most." 12 comments, all affirming. You've always been the strongest, Elaine. They'll come around, just wait. No one can question the kind of mother you've been." The light above my stove buzzed softly. I sat at the kitchen counter, the edge of the stool pressing into the backs of my knees, and scrolled until the photo blurred. The tea was still there, surface unmoving. I placed my hand around it, not to drink, just to see if any warmth remained. The same night, I received an email marked urgent from the school board secretary. She used formal language, but it didn't mask the plea. "We understand you are the daughter of board member Elaine Granger and would like to invite you to make a brief appearance at the upcoming meeting to support her continued leadership during a sensitive time." There was no mention of the investigation, no mention of the missing grant money, the rumors about diverted funds, the quiet shifting of finances that had begun to draw attention. I looked at the email, then at the mug. The heat was gone. A faint ring circled the inside, leaving behind a soft brown outline. I carried it to the sink and let the water run until the stain swirled and disappeared. 2 days later, Dylan tried again. "They just want you to stand next to her, Margot. That's all. You don't even have to speak." I didn't answer immediately. He waited. "She said to remind you. You wouldn't even have your degree if it weren't for me." Her words, not mine. Still, I said nothing. Eventually he added, "Look, people talk. They're saying the family's fractured, that she's not who she used to be. It's affecting everything." He didn't say my name once during the call. I sat at my small table afterward and opened a book I hadn't read in years. The spine cracked. The pages smelled like old glue and thrift store air. I didn't read a word, just turned pages slowly, letting the paper move beneath my fingers. The knock didn't come. No one arrived at my door. No bouquet, no handwritten apology, no envelope slid beneath the mat. Just the usual ads in the mailbox and the mechanical hum of the hallway light. I bought groceries that Sunday. A cashier asked if I had plans for the week. I smiled without answering. She handed me my change without pushing. In the elevator, I stared at the reflection in the steel doors. My face looked quieter, not stronger, just less interested in explaining. I posted nothing. I updated no one. I didn't go to the meeting. The night it took place, I folded laundry while a podcast played softly in the background. It was about birds that sing at night, how they wait until the noise dies down to be heard. The final message came the next morning. "You made your choice. Don't expect this door to stay open forever." I didn't delete it. I didn't save it, either. I let the screen dim slowly in my hand, and when it went black, I stared at my reflection again. This time, faint, ghost-like, floating just beneath the fingerprints. A thought passed through me, not loud, not bitter. They never missed me. They just missed my silence. And I kept it. The silence now has texture. It isn't hollow anymore. It holds shape like something I can lean against without fear of collapse. Most mornings begin the same way. I slice a banana into a chipped white bowl, pour oats, and press my thumb against the rim of the coffee pot until the click sounds. The cactus on the window ledge has started to lean toward the light. I shift it a 1/4 inch each day. It has not died. Neither have I. No one tells me what to wear anymore. No one sighs when I tie my scarf twice or roll my sleeves even when it's cold. No one eyes my breakfast and says it's not enough or too much or just like your aunt used to do when she was heavier. I eat slowly now, not because I savor, but because nothing is chasing me. The community center downtown smells like pencil shavings and reheated coffee. I sit across from a boy who doesn't speak much but draws circles that overlap. His mother fills out forms while holding a chipped phone case. The therapist beside me gestures toward a laminated poster, then nods. I only assist twice a week. I don't need more. They let me be quiet, and somehow that's useful here. Margot, would you mind observing her body language during the next session? They hand me a clipboard, not because they doubt me, but because I'm part of the process. Not decoration, not obligation. I bring the board home sometimes. I never look at the notes, but I like seeing my handwriting on pages that no one edits before I've finished. One Thursday, I return to find an envelope wedged into the doorframe. No address. Just my name, ink slightly smudged, as if the writer paused too long before each letter. I boiled water before opening it. My grandmother's watch sat beside the stove, its cracked face still ticking, faintly. Inside was a single line written on a torn receipt. You don't have to forgive her. But I do. The handwriting was Dylan's. A week later, he showed up. Not in the suit our mother liked him in. No car. He stood by the curb holding a paper bag with oranges and a loaf of rye bread. His eyes kept finding the sidewalk cracks. I shouldn't have waited this long. He shifted the bag into one hand. I told her I was visiting a friend. I leaned on the doorway not to block him, just to feel the wood against my shoulder. He didn't ask to come in. She's spiraling. Says you've abandoned the bloodline. He shook his head lightly. She still thinks it's about pride. There was no reply rehearsed in my throat. She asked me to convince you to show up at the church benefit next week. For appearance. Said the donors were starting to suspect things. I didn't flinch. I said no. I noticed then that his shoes were worn down unevenly, that he hadn't trimmed the thread dangling from his sleeve. He looked younger than I remembered. Or just less arranged. I've been thinking, he continued, about who I am when no one's looking. And who taught me to lie well. I waited. I used to think she was strong because she never cried, but now I think she just doesn't feel what she can't control. His voice broke not into pieces, but like something long frozen starting to thaw unevenly. He didn't stay long, left the bread and the oranges and something else I didn't find until later, a folded photo from years ago, one I'd never seen. Me at 12, holding a watercolor painting face, half-shadowed, but smiling towards someone off-frame. On the back, 2 words I remember. I didn't reply. The next day I cleared the second chair at my table. I didn't fill it. I just cleared it. At the center, a girl named Maya drew a map of her old neighborhood, tracing where she used to ride her bike. I didn't know how to brake, she said, so I ran into hedges. I found myself nodding. That still counts as stopping. Later that night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in months. Inside was the sweater from my second semester, the one I bought with money from my first tutoring job. It had a small tear at the sleeve and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. I wore it to the grocery store. No one commented. No one asked who bought it. No one asked, or anything at all. I've stopped expecting explanations. From them. From the world. Even from myself. My phone buzzed on Sunday. The screen read, Elaine. I didn't block the number. I just turned the phone face down and walked to the sink. The water was warm. I washed a single glass slowly, dried it with a towel stitched with someone else's initials. At night, I light a candle, not for prayer, but for space. I write things down, not because I need to remember, but because I need to release. Today's note was simple. You are not too much. You are never too much. The plant by the window is growing toward the light. It still leans. But now, let it. I still walk past mirrors quickly. Some reflexes stay longer than they should. But I don't apologize to my own reflection anymore. One of the counselors at the center asked me if I wanted a permanent position. "You've got something the kids trust," she said. "You don't hover. You wait." I told her I'd think about it. I haven't told anyone about Dylan's visit. Not because it's a secret, but because not everything needs to be narrated aloud to be real. He came. He left. That was enough. I hung the photo on the back of the pantry door. It's not for display, just for balance, like a bookend holding a memory in place. When I boil water now, I let it whistle a second longer, just to be sure I hear it. The world doesn't need me to make announcements. I wake up. I move through the day. I keep my receipts. I fold the blankets. I water the cactus. These aren't accomplishments. They're choices. That's what no one ever taught me. That choosing quietly is still choosing. Some endings don't make a sound. They just settle like dust on a windowsill. No one wipes anymore. I folded the papers one by one, smoothing the edges, even though no one would notice. The legal name change came first with the faint notary stamp in the bottom corner. My new name sat quietly at the top of the page. No flourish, no announcement. Just a different set of letters. It looked more like me than I ever did. Next was the termination of guarantor responsibility. A clean paragraph, formal language signed twice. It took weeks to get it processed, but I waited. Not out of spite, just to be sure. I didn't want anyone to think I might come back for the leftovers. I added a photocopy of the journal page from college, the one where the handwriting curved slightly right from too much pressure. The date at the top, September 19th. Underneath it, she introduced me as Melissa twice before catching herself, then laughed and said, "Well, same thing, right?" That was my 20th birthday. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a record, a small, folded piece of proof that I hadn't imagined all of it. I slid everything into a cream envelope, not white, not stark. Cream like the inside of an old piano key. On the front in fine pen, I wrote, "Foreclosure, not conversation." The weather was neither warm nor cold, the kind of grey that doesn't suggest anything. I walked the 3 blocks without rush. My shoes didn't make noise on the sidewalk. Even the mailboxes seemed quieter than usual. Her porch hadn't changed. Still the same uneven tile on the left, the same potted plant that bloomed but never fully opened. I set the envelope down, not centered, just slightly to the side of the welcome mat. No knock, no pause, no glance through the window. I walked away with both hands empty. Earlier that morning, I'd moved the old watch from the dresser to the inside pocket of my coat, not because I needed the time, but because I didn't want to leave it behind. It was never hers to take. A voicemail came through some time after. I didn't listen to it, just read the transcription. Only one line stood out. "You'll regret making this so final." The screen dimmed before I pressed delete. At the community center, a boy handed me a drawing of a house with no doors. I asked him if it was finished. He shrugged and said, "No one comes in." So why build one? I kept that paper, tucked it into the back of my notebook. I never told him it made sense. Back at my place, I boiled water and let the whistle linger. The cactus leaned further toward the light that day. I didn't turn it. I let it choose its own shape. The photo of me at 12 had curled slightly at the edges. I pressed it between the pages of a book I no longer read, but refused to donate. The name on the cover still had my old initials. I didn't cross them out. I just closed the book and slid it back onto the shelf. A week passed without any more calls, no unexpected knocks. The silence didn't celebrate, but it didn't accuse either. It simply continued. I thought once about whether she opened the envelope right away, or let it sit heavy and plain near the door. Whether she read the journal page, skimmed the name change, paused at her own signature in the guarantor form. Whether she felt anything at all. But I didn't linger there. I folded that, wandering into itself like a napkin after a finished meal. Some people live their entire lives collecting explanations. Others survive by releasing the need for them. I think I've become the latter. There's a space now just beneath my ribs that doesn't flinch when I hear her name. I don't speak it, but I don't avoid it either. I still remember the way her perfume clung to coats and never to skin, the way she could close a conversation with a single glance, the way she called things family matters only when they hurt. But I remember other things too. The way my own signature grew steadier each year, the way my grandmother's watch ticked on through all of it, the way I started buying fruit, not because it was on sale, but because it looked alive. I've stopped rereading old texts, stopped drafting messages I'll never send, stopped hoping for a version of her that never arrived. What I left on her porch wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a plea. It was a document trail of who I'd become without her voice naming it, shaping it, claiming it. No ceremony, no final word, just ink on paper, just quiet choices, just distance kept not from fear, but from truth. The porch probably looked the same the next morning. Maybe the envelope sat untouched, maybe not. I didn't return to check. The silence that followed didn't echo. It settled soft and final, and I let it. Some mornings arrive without asking anything from me. No urgency, no reminders, just the light coming in. I woke before the street below made a sound. The air held a kind of pause, like even the sky wasn't sure whether to turn warm or stay cold. I didn't check the time. The kettle took longer than usual, but I let it. The chamomile bag floated quietly in the glass cup. No spoon, no stirring. The beige tablecloth rippled slightly where the seam met the edge. I had stitched it myself, not because it saved money, but because I wanted to keep my hands steady. The thread was mismatched ivory on one side, pale grey on the other. It showed if you looked closely. I didn't mind. Sunlight filtered through the smaller window, catching the corner of the refrigerator. The post-it note fluttered once-twice. I'd forgotten it was still there. Build a life no one can revoke. I had written it one evening, after watching someone in the park teach their daughter how to fall without crying. I'd gone home and poured myself water, not wine. That had felt like a kind of vow. The envelope was already out on the counter, the seal split cleanly with a letter opener I hadn't used in months. Her handwriting hadn't changed, neither had the weight of her words. Families endure what others can't. I'll always be your mother, whether you claim it or not. You'll look back and regret how far you've pushed this. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't even finish the last sentence. My hands moved on their own, folding the letter once, then twice. The metal tin I used for incense had just enough space left. The match burned, slowly, orange, then blue. The ash curled like ribbon and collapsed into itself. Honey stirred at the sound, but didn't rise. She stretched one paw over her eyes and let her weight fall against the cushion. Her fur was lighter now, brushed daily, no longer matted like when I found her. She smelled like clean blankets and the faint mint of the balm I kept on the bookshelf. I slid my finger across the tape deck's dusty lid. It clicked open after a soft protest. The cassette inside was already set to side B. I pressed play. A few seconds of nothing, then the low, breathy hum of a saxophone. The notes wandered more than they moved. Stan Getz, slow and clear. I sat with it, letting the song fill the room, the way steam fills a mirror, without sharp lines, without explanation. Next to me was the envelope I'd been meaning to address for 3 days. Inside it, a small card with my handwriting on thick paper stock, to the next recipient of the August L. Stone Fellowship. I had no legal ties to the board anymore, but I knew the coordinator. He said my letter could still be passed on anonymously. I preferred it that way. I wrote the rest without crossing anything out. You owe no one your pain, only your growth. You don't have to share your history to prove you've earned your future, and if anyone demands your story like it's a debt, know that silence is a full sentence. The pen left a small smudge at the corner. I didn't blot it. It looked like breath on glass, temporary, but real. Outside, someone walked their child across the sidewalk, backpacks too big for their shoulders. One of them tripped, laughed, kept walking. I leaned back and let the sound fade into the distance. I didn't wonder if Elaine would write again. I didn't rehearse responses. There were no more letters to burn, no more names to erase. I hadn't won anything. There was nothing left to win. The lavender in the kitchen window had started blooming again. I hadn't watered it in 3 days, but the soil still felt soft. I pressed 2 fingers into it, then wiped them against the side of my jeans. I hadn't worn perfume in a year. I hadn't stood in front of a mirror and asked what someone else would think. I hadn't tried to become someone worthy of forgiveness or welcome or applause. I just made the tea. I fed the dog. I bought thread when it ran out. I used to think peace was something granted or given or earned after enough suffering, but maybe peace is just the absence of trying so hard to be seen. I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and set it on the windowsill. No return address. No need. Honey shifted again, eyes opening briefly before closing all the way. Her ear twitched once. I touched the side of her paw not to wake her, just to remind myself of warmth. The cassette clicked at the end of the track. I didn't rewind it. I just let the light keep coming in.